It started as a place called Coxtown. In 1873, it was incorporated and renamed Fleetwood.
My name is Arthur Counts. I lived in Fleetwood 40 years.
Name Barney Dietrich Bernard, and been living in Fleetwood since I was 11 years old. So that's some 70 years.
My name's Andrew Hawes, and I've lived in Fleetwood for 17 years now.
My name is Betty Buss, and we moved to Fleetwood in 1964.
My name is Robert Knoll, otherwise known as Bob. I was born in Fleetwood 89 years ago, and I've lived here ever since.
My name is Betty J. Labelsberger, and I have lived in the town of Fleetwood for 69 years. But before that, I lived outside of Fleetwood, going up Poplar Street Hill, up that way.
David Weber, a number of years, many years.
I'm Eric Katzenmoyer, and I've lived in Fleetwood since 2018, so that's 4 years.
My name is Jean Yoder Widener, and I've been here all my life, which is 87 years. I was born and raised here.
Joel Schaeffer, age 91, and spent almost all my life in Fleetwood.
I'm Lynn Faust-Kopic, and I've lived in Fleetwood since I was 4 years old.
My name is John Manmiller. I've lived in Fleetwood my entire life. I'm 54, almost 55. I've moved twice, and every house I've been in has been in Fleetwood.
My name is Joan Ebling. I live in Fleetwood for 79 years.
My name is Megan Youngcraft. I've lived in Fleetwood for 29 years.
I'm Merrill Schaeffer. I have been a resident of the Fleetwood area for the last 88 years.
Mike Mayer. I've lived in Fleetwood my whole life since 1957.
Lived in Fleetwood my whole life except for the years he was in Delaware for a couple of years, but yeah, so that's 67 years.
Russell James Anderson, since 1948.
I'm Sandy Moyer, Sandra Moyer. My maiden name was Price. I was born in Fleetwood. I have lived in Fleetwood 84 years.
I'm Bill Strause. I lived in Fleetwood all my life. I'm 73, except for 4 years at Lehigh University. I had a Fleetwood address all my life, yes.
My name is Dr. Tammy Gore. I'm the mayor of the borough of Fleetwood, proudly. I have been here since 1999.
My name is Tim O'Neill, and I've lived in Fleetwood for 63 and a half years now.
In 1800, a small town was laid out in the rolling hills of Berks County, Pennsylvania. Early settlers were given grants of land. The initial tracts were given to the Wanners, Elis, and Schlegels, and today make up the confines of Fleetwood. And that was the beginning. It was called Coxtown prior to the railroad being built through the town. In 1800, there were 5 scattered log houses along Franklin Street. One of those was occupied by the Cox family. The family came to notoriety in 1809 because of the hanging of one of their daughters in nearby Reading, Susanna Cox, who was convicted of killing her infant son. In the early part of the 19th century, a tavern was erected on the site of what is today Main and Franklin Streets, called the Green Hotel, home to many travelers passing through the area. After the tavern opened, a general store and blacksmith shop in the area soon followed. The Farmers and Drovers Hotel was built on the north end of Franklin Street. The shield of the old hotel boasted 2 crows. Legend had it that someone traveling through the village once cawed like a crow, angering the landlord, and consequently the area was known as Kropisstadel, or Crowtown. In June 1857, ground was broken for the railroad connecting Reading and Allentown. In 1859, officials of the Reading Railroad took an inspection tour of the East Penn branch. It was during this tour that names were given to many stations along the route. There was always a story of how Coxtown became Fleetwood, just maybe not the right one.
There were two surveyors, and one was named Fleet, and the other last name was Wood, and so they put it together for Fleetwood. Now, it was Coxtown at one time. That was prior to Fleetwood.
I feel like I've heard this. Like, I feel like someone told me this.
When I was growing up, it was Mr. Fleet and Mr. Wood, something to do with the railroad.
Oh, the first thing that comes to my mind is the two surveyors called Fleet and Wood. I don't know if it's, that's the story I've always heard.
Well, see, now this is terrible. So, you can't put this in. I know we used to be called Coxtown at one point in history, and I always joke about we should have just kept that. Because, like, we're right down the road from Virginville. Imagine the marketing. It would have been great, the merchandise. So no, I don't know how Fleetwood came about for sure.
Fleetwood were the two guys who were worked on the railroad, and Mr. Fleet and Mr. Wood, and that's, but I don't know. I don't know the truth to it. No, I don't know. I have no idea.
Mr. Fleet and Mr. Wood came to town. That's all I know is they just combined the names, and that's how we got Fleetwood.
Oh, you hear about there was a Mr. Fleet and a Mr. Wood, originally Coxtown, so I'm not really sure what this correct answer is for that.
I'm guessing, I always thought it came from the car industry.
Well, I don't know if it's a real story, but at one time I was told there was a Mr. Fleet and a Mr. Wood working on the railroad, and at one time it was Coxtown. So that's what I know about it.
I don't know. I don't know. Isn't that something? I don't know how my own town that I live in. No, I don't.
I know how Fleetwood got its name. I mean, Fleetwood got its name from the board of directors of the railroad. When they came up here to christen the East Penn branch of the railroad, the directors, they renamed, they were going to name their stations. They came through Fleetwood, and one of the directors was familiar with Fleetwood, England, which he thought was a very nice place. That's how he named Fleetwood. And that's how Fleetwood got its name, because it was named Coxtown originally. But once the railroad named the station Fleetwood, the name stuck. And when we were incorporated in 1873, we were incorporated as the borough of Fleetwood. And it had nothing to do with the surveyor by the name of Fleet and Wood.
And Fleetwood was born. Over the years, it changed and grew into the community it is today. 1873 also marked the year when the Union Hotel on Main Street became Dewey's Hotel. The Cox Brothers cotton factory burned in May, and Lewis Warner built a white Victorian house that still stands on North Richmond and Washington Streets. By 1890, the population of the town had grown to 1,800, and in 1898, any person riding a bicycle on the pavement was fined $1 for each offense. 1902 brought the trolley line through town, and in 1905, electricity was introduced to Fleetwood. And by 1912, there were 12 subscribers to the Bell Telephone Exchange. The Hotel Fleetwood, previously called the Green Hotel, was erected in 1914 at the corner of Main and Franklin, and Homan's Dairy began delivering milk by horse and buggy in 1918. Fleetwood Bank moved to its current location in 1921, and the fire company was built at Franklin and Washington Streets in 1928 for $65,000. And by 1930, the police department was formed with 2 jail cells installed in the basement of the fire company. In 1939, the telephone dial system began with 265 subscribers as Fleetwood's population grew to 2,240 by 1940. Businesses came and went, and the town continued to evolve into what it is today. Kermit Nur's Barber Shop opened in 1951. Clark's TV and Appliance was established in 1954. And 1955 saw the creation of the Fleetwood Shirt Factory, as well as the Fleetwood JCs. The Fleetwood Grange held its first meeting in its current building in 1957. 10 years later, F.M. Brown's flour mill was remodeled, increasing production, and in 1968 a new Fleetwood High School was completed. A few years later, in 1972, the Penn Dutch Cookie Factory opened, and then, just like that, in 1973, Fleetwood was already celebrating its 100th anniversary. Kenny and Millie Kohler became sole owners of Grand Central Tap Room in 1976, and by 2001, Albright Strause was still opening his store daily. Life in Fleetwood continued to change rapidly, but the cherished memories remain.
Well, I have a lot of memories since I grew up here. And went to school here. And I guess I can mention the movie theater now. That was a favorite. My dad managed it for a couple of years. The fire company owned it. And I'm sure that people miss that today.
I lived on Main Street, and I was a newspaper boy, and I would deliver newspapers all times of the year, and especially in the winter, when I would take my newspapers up Richmond Street, and people would come out in the wintertime and give me hot chocolate.
Well, you know what I really miss? Some of the stores that disappeared, like the drugstore. You could go to there even was a jewelry store, a ladies' shop, you know, all those little small shops.
I remember skating on the ice skating rink across from the community center. I remember playing hockey as a kid. I loved that. We'd go and find wherever there was ice, and playing softball and the baseball on the school grounds. I also had a lot of good memories as a JC.
JCs. Probably JCs. That's where all the young. It's very active. We were a very active club. We did a lot of things for the town. Yeah, it's a good bunch.
Let's see, when we were growing up, you had 3 different doctors in town, I think, and I remember, unfortunately grew up with asthma, and I remember many a nights Dr. Trexler would come to our house, or we'd go to his house in the middle of the night, you know, for care. And it was just that, again, that hometown, old school stuff that just really you don't see anymore.
A lot of soccer memories, the 78 and 80s and the 2018 state champ teams. And just, I guess our 4 kids' graduation from high school would have been one of our favorites too.
Well, yeah, back then, growing up, things were a lot calmer. We didn't have cell phones. Kids would play in neighborhood yards. Back then, the line box had a yard next to where Dragon 21 was. Fleetwood Appliance was there. And the Herbs had a big yard that where Clark's Appliance is now. And the kids would often gather in the yard there at the Herbs and play on the equipment and have a good time.
Living on Locust Street in Fleetwood with all the vendors that used to come by and visit your house, the ragman, the butcher, the huckster, the milkman, people selling pastry. It was just everybody came to your house or down your street and were offering supplies. You didn't have to run anywhere. You could just sit in your front porch and they came and delivered it.
I would say probably the Centennial was probably when the Centennial was, because we were in high school at the time and it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of fun activities that went on back in 1973. They had all kinds of stuff for the entire year going on. I think one of the neatest things was the jailhouse that they had up on Main Street. You had to have your car, when you parked your car, it had to be anchored or you got fined and put in jail. And that was funny to see the guys in jail and see all the guys that didn't normally have facial hair but they had the beard contest, beard or mustache contest.
My favorite memories from my childhood were going to Sunday school at St. Paul's Lutheran Reformed Combined Church. It was practically the only social life we had in Fleetwood at that time. And it was, we started going as small children. Our parents did not go either to Sunday school or church, but we all went. White gloves, hats, Mary Jane shoes, and we were happy to be there. And then we graduated to the bigger side of the church when we got to be teenagers. And then I graduated to be the teacher of the 8th grade girls when I was a senior.
A lot of memories growing up as a kid, you know, playing outside, playing with the other kids.
Our gang at the pool. In the summers, we'd always go to the pool and we'd have a group that would hang out. We always had our same spot, and the group kept growing and growing. So yeah, that was a good time in the summer.
One of the happiest times of my life was I got discharged March 29th, 1957, and I got home at 6 o'clock, and Fleetwood was playing for the Class C basketball state championship at 7 o'clock in an Albright. Well, I got a ride into Albright, and my dad was waiting for me with a ticket, and the place was packed. And of course, I would say 2/3 of Fleetwood was at the game. They won by 1 point, 64-63. And that was a very happy day. That was a night I'll never forget. There was horns blowing, cars from beyond Price Town, bumper to bumper, down to Fleetwood. And of course, driving up and down Main Street, sirens going, bells ringing. I never saw Fleetwood excited like that, never.
We could ride our bikes anywhere in town. We'd go to Strause's, we'd go to the pool. If we were ever hurt or anything like that, we knew somebody on every block that we could knock on their door and ask for help. So just growing up, I had a great childhood here.
The people, yeah, all the different families and their histories and things, that would be, and we can really elaborate on them from my neighbors, the Schlegels, and so there's 5 of them in there, and all their stories and things. So it's absolutely unique to be able to see generations of people. And being a funeral director, that's what I see. I mean, it's been fun.
The camaraderie of all the people, the residents that lived here. Like I said, I was born in Fleetwood, and a lot of the people had porches, and we had no air conditioning in the houses, so people sat out on their porch, and they got to know their neighbors. You know, you hid the key to get in the house on the top ledge of the window, and everybody did that. So you knew where everybody's key was. You could have gotten into their house, but you would have never thought of it unless there was a problem. I know that my grandfather, we lived in a semi-detached house, so he would know the people that would come to visit our neighbors. And if they came and our neighbors were away, he'd say, "Oh, they went away, but I'll tell them that you were here," kind of thing, you know. And that's what everybody did.
Greasy spoon.
Yeah.
There was a restaurant over the gathering for all the kids next to the bank. It's now a parking lot. But that's where everyone got together. And we had a great time there. The Greasy Spoon was the place to be. And I miss that. Yeah, I miss that.
I like to remember the parades, the Halloween parades. They used to go past my house, and we used to put up 3 spotlights from the second floor to shine down on the street that when it came past there.
Halloween parades. Halloween parades were always great in Fleetwood. They were a lot of fun growing up.
What makes Fleetwood special to me, I would say, is
I'm going to go back to community a little bit. But I think the fact that the community is very supportive of young individuals. And that's something that, as a young person, I find special about Fleetwood.
And so Fleetwood became a special place through the organizations, businesses, and the people. Cars have long been associated with Fleetwood, beginning with the Hill car to the Fleetwood Cadillac. The Hill car was conceived by James Hill at the age of 13. In 1885, after driving the vehicle on the streets and scaring both residents and their animals, the car was banned and remained in his garage for the next 15 years. The Fleetwood Auto Body started in 1909 and was later purchased by the Fisher Body Company, a division of General Motors. It continued in operation until 1931, when it was moved to Detroit. The Fleetwood Cadillac was just one of many cars that used the auto bodies and is still made in Detroit to this day. Two other local Fleetwood families have had a long tradition of selling and working on cars in Fleetwood. Leibelsberger's Garage has been in the family since 1922 and is still operating in Fleetwood on Main Street.
It started in 1922 with John K. Leibelsberger with a battery repair business. I know I used to, at one time when I was involved, even when Bruce was living, ran for parts sometimes, you know. I got to go here and there.
Seaman started in 1917 at the corner of Washington and Franklin Streets, founded by Alan Seaman. It stayed in the family for generations, later becoming a Chevrolet dealership.
I remember the mechanics. Here comes Big Bad John, little guy running around, creating havoc with the mechanics in the garage. And when they got tired of me, they would give me some change. And as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, I would go across the street to Strause's store, get them their cigarettes, and if there was change left, I'd get to get penny candy. So I guess you couldn't buy cigarettes as a 7, 8-year-old now. But that's what I did, and they got me out of their hair for a little while. I remember my grandfather's 27 Chevy Cabriolet, blue, had a rumble seat in the back, going for rides. I remember the leather sofas in the showroom with the ashtrays and the cigars, and the guys, always smoking cigars in there. And the showroom wasn't big. It was a one-car showroom. The parts department was in there. The secretary, my mom, worked there as a secretary. She did the deals, the paperwork for the purchases. So it was a mom and pop operation. If you sold 10 cars a month, that was good.
And other borough residents opened businesses through the years that have now disappeared.
I'm very partial to the Pinnacle Equipment Corporation and the group of men that started that in this community. They were men that worked at the Fleetwood Body Works and for Fleetwood Craftsmen, and they provided employment for almost 50 years to all the people in Fleetwood, and they were always doing things, projects for community organizations, so that they were very community oriented there, from the Boy Scouts to the JCs to any project that was going on in Fleetwood, they'd make it. What do you want for it?
My dad worked at the Pinnacle, and that was, when growing up, and then my grandfather was actually a night watchman there, and so when we were kids, we would take his lunch to him and stuff when he was the night watchman. We'd go down there and hang out with him for a little bit. But yeah, the Pinnacle was a good place, to work and stuff like that.
So many stories I could tell you, the silly little tricks they did at Pinnacle. You had to have thick skin to work there because somebody was always pulling a prank. It was called the funnel trick, where you put a funnel inside your pants. Well, you didn't do it, someone, come on, do this. And then they put a dime on your nose, and you were supposed to go like this here, and the dime would fall in the funnel. But while your head was like this, they were dropping water in the funnel.
But plenty of iconic buildings remain in Fleetwood, including the original school on Arch Street built in 1884, with additions in 1908 and 1919 that housed all 12 grades.
I can still walk through this building. I can tell you which grade on the first floor, where was first grade, second grade, third grade, and so forth. 1 to 6 was usually on the first floor, 7 through 12 was on the second floor. We had one class of each, and my class of 1952, we had 39.
My first grade teacher was my kid's kindergarten teacher, Lillian Walters. My second grade teacher was Mrs. Fegley, and Troy had Mrs. Fegley. Also, Esther Schlegel was there in 5th grade. Now, they didn't have her, but those were teachers that I had. And it just seemed like they were just there forever.
The building that I'm in right now, which is now the Fleetwood Borough building, is the same building where I attended 5th grade. My teacher was Esther Schlegel. We had great respect for our teachers. We were in awe of them, actually. And I never realized until later that my elementary teachers, including Lillian Schlegel Walter, and Marguerite Chamberlain, and all of them actually had degrees from fine places like Columbia. And of course, we didn't know that then, but they chose to teach here. So I guess it's a pretty good place.
Going to a one-room schoolhouse and then coming to this schoolhouse was a big change.
The school did not have a cafeteria, so you had to go home for lunch every day. So you had an hour. Well, at the time, I lived above the railroad, as did other children. And oftentimes, on the way back, there was a train across the crossing that wasn't moving, so there we stood. And we had what I refer to as a railroad crossing guard. He had a little room that was built that he manually operated the gates. And he would say, now don't you try to crawl under that train or go over at the end of one of the cars. He said, if you get in trouble with your principal, you tell him to come to me, and I'll tell him that you could not cross the railroad.
So I had a lot of talent in this town. A lot of talent went through our schools, and our school should be proud.
Another iconic building is the May A. Stump Funeral Home. Founded in 1906, it's still taking care of the town.
My mother, who was May Stump, her father was Jim Stump, and he really didn't start the business. It was his brother started the business in that time in 06, and that was Curtin Stump. And they came from Kutztown, and they came here and they started the business. But then my mother went on to becoming a nurse, and in that time she, after nursing school, her father asked her to become a mortician. And so that time it was only like 6 months of schooling. And this is like 1937, 38. And what happened in embalming school, she met my father. So, and she got her license. And so from there, she ran the business until 1980. And that's when I took over. But the thing was with her is she was one of the first women funeral directors at that time. But all through her career, she always looked at it that she was a nurse. She was more a nurse than she was a funeral director. So if you asked her what she did, she would say, "I'm a nurse." So and that was the caregiving that she got from nursing. I think one of the things that everyone asks is like, especially when you become my age, is when are you going to retire? And my immediate response is when I'm a customer. So that's, you have to have a sense of humor.
And two businesses that changed the character of the town and are missed by everyone are Rauch's drugstore and Strause's grocery store. The drugstore was located on Main Street and was Fleetwood's first pharmacy. It opened in 1909 in part of David Hoover's saddle shop. Later, it became the first soda fountain in Fleetwood. In 1939, Arthur Doc Rauch Sr. and his wife Grace took over the business.
The drugstore, because all the teenagers, when you were in high school, you always got around that place.
Okay, after school, we'd either go to Rauch's store to have ice cream and a pretzel.
The drugstore with the ice cream soda fountain, because I love ice cream. And they had the best ice cream and little pretzels and lemon blends.
Soda fountain.
Yeah. Used to go in there and get ice cream and little pretzels on the side.
Since 1904, there was always a grocery store on the corner of Washington Street and Cole Alley, and Strause's was everyone's favorite with his famous penny candy.
Well, my grandfather had a store there first. He bought, I believe it was Hefner's store back in 1920s. And when my dad was in 8th grade, he quit school to run the store. And except for his time in the service, he was in that store from age 8 to 84. The candy case got moved to right inside the front door. Well, that's so he could close the sides off so kids wouldn't sneak back in and go through everything else in the back of the store. Yeah, keep his eye on kids coming in there.
We had no place to rehearse for band, so we were allowed to use the upstairs at the fire company. But when you walked from school to the fire company, golly, we passed Strause's store. And of course, penny candy was, the mainstay of kids in those days.
I remember going up there after school and he'd already have 25 fish, in little paper bags for $1. And he didn't have to count them out. He had them all ready to go.
I went to Strause's on the way to school or on the way home for the penny candy.
That was a handy store for us. My mother, many times cooking or baking, running short on something, so I had to run an errand, go up the alley from our house, which is only half a block away, to the grocery store. And it was mostly noted for the school kids for the penny candy. And he always had a good arrangement or variety of penny candy.
I went there, my kids went there, my grandchildren went there. And Albright Strauss was actually in the war, and he was badly injured in Europe. And all the times we went there, I never knew that. But he was so patient, would stand there and say, well, the children said, I'll have one of these, and then I'll have 2 of those licorice things. And he never showed impatience, and he just waited.
After school, that would be the place to go to get your candy, or even before school, because he was usually open by the time we went to school and stuff. So
a lot of people stopped in there to talk to him. And that's one of the things I think that was hard on my dad when he got in the 80s. A lot of his friends who used to stop in weren't around anymore. Either they moved away or passed on, and it wasn't the meeting place it used to be.
Every year on Thanksgiving Day, Santa made an appearance. Christmas songs played till New Year's Day from the speakers on the front porch, spilling through the streets of Fleetwood. It's a fond memory still beloved by residents.
Thanksgiving Day, and they'd hand out usually some kind of a dish or plate, whatever.
Santa Claus.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Every year.
Every year Santa Claus. Then helicopter came one time. It was, the first time Santa Claus came by helicopter. But he'd always give out little bunnies sometimes, and
cups.
Chickies.
My sister and I used to walk down there Thanksgiving Day to see it and get the item.
The Santa came many different ways. He came in an old butcher wagon, he came school bus, he came by biplane, landed down the field, down toward the creek, I believe, toward Masilum. He came by helicopter.
He was my uncle. So, yeah, my mom and Betty were sisters. So, yeah, that used to be a family thing, too, that, you know, the relatives would go up there on Thanksgiving and see Santa.
Well, I remember we always had to rush through Thanksgiving dinner so that we could get up there on time. And I just remember Santa coming in various different ways, you know, sometimes on a sled, sometimes by either helicopter or airplane. He came in many different vehicles over the years. And, well, everybody just, Fleetwood all came out because then we were going to get a free gift, too. So Strause was an important person in Fleetwood.
But there was one other place that disappeared from Fleetwood that left a lasting impression.
Movie theater, probably, for entertainment.
Oh, yeah. The old movie theater was great.
The movie theater, in addition to the drugstore, that was a great time at the movie theater.
It was a good place to go. Yeah, we had fun. Keep off the balcony. That was the Lover's Lane cell.
That was what?
Lover's Lane.
Oh. Is that why we were never up there?
That's right.
Oh, well, I wasn't up there. And the candy there was what, like 5 cents?
My father was manager for that for a while, and they had movies Mondays, Wednesdays, Friday, and Saturday. And same show showing on Fridays and Saturdays. Monday was usually cowboy night. Wednesday night was more serious type of movie. And Friday and Saturday was entertainment for the whole family. And I used to look forward to the movies.
That's the only thing we had to do in Fleetwood. We didn't have a pool. We didn't have a recreation center. There was really, we didn't even have a park in the beginning when I was small. And the movies saved us. We had Rita Hayworth and we had Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, so it was a wonderful, wonderful thing.
I worked in it too, took tickets, and had a lot of fun. I can't imagine kids growing up and not having the closeness of the theater that we had. We had to run the movies they picked, my dad picked, had to be so many days after they ran in Reading, except for one, The Sound of Music. It ran before anyone else. And so we had some fun there. So that was one thing when it shut down, and I guess television had a lot to do with that. But the town missed that. That was a big favorite in the town.
The auditorium, built in 1928, was housed in the old Fleetwood Fire Company building on Franklin Street. Organized in 1914, the Volunteer Fire Company has always been a big part of the community. Its first fire truck was purchased in 1917 for $1,957, and its current station was built in 1981 on Chestnut Street.
And then we have 35 to 40 active firefighters. It's a really good organization. You know, we have a group of people that volunteer their hours every week, training every week.
So I joined the fire company, much to my parents' chagrin. I think they were hoping that I wouldn't. My dad was chief growing up, so it was very much a part of our family and just how we lived our life. At any moment, the pager goes off and dad leaves dinner, then my older brother, and then me. And my mom, you know, is left by herself at the dinner table. So that was something that I just knew that I would do. We have a great crew.
My first job as a council person, in fact, it was before I was supposed to start serving, was the tannery fire in 2005. And so it was in December, and they called me in before my term actually started. And my memory about that is how in awe, how impressed I was with the coordination of all of our first responders. The fire chief, the fire company, the fire police, our police officers, the council members, the members of the community, just everyone, and how they contained that fire. I just was so impressed and just felt so fortunate that we had people that were so willing to serve, and it was dangerous. I mean, that was a very scary thing.
There's so much dedication there, and I wish I could tell you. I mean, hats off to those guys. They give so much of their time for the community. It's amazing. The dedication is unbelievable. Why? They're that dedicated to fighting fires and helping people. You know, it'd be great if everybody was like that.
When I started back in '84, we probably did like 120 calls a year. So you could go days without a call. And now we did like 510 calls last year. So it's tripled. You know, we're averaging almost 2 calls a day. You can still go days without having a call, but then you can have 3 in an afternoon like we had today. But we always manage to get trucks out the door. You know, we go farther and farther all the time to help with other departments, with our manpower and equipment, and we'll do whatever. I never really listen to my radio, my pager. When it goes off, we just go. Wherever we're gonna go, we just go.
Going to soccer games was another thing that everyone did. Ray Buss changed the team's fortunes with his nearly 30 years of coaching, turning the team into a powerhouse, winning 476 games in his career and leaving a lasting impression on the sport in Fleetwood.
As far as Fleetwood was concerned, things fell into place because there was an opening for a soccer coach, and he did not want to be an athletic director. That was too much sitting around, too much paperwork. And so he had the 5 years in basketball and then the rest in soccer. And it just flowed. I think one of the big changes was that he started the youth program, because there were not youth programs. And our kids played up at Evergreen. And then we sat up there and thought, why are we sitting here? We have enough kids here to start our own teams. And so the youth program was a big asset to soccer.
Mr. Buss made it a family affair. You know, it was the parents of the like my dad, her dad, Sharon's dad, Jerry Moyer, the parents of the kids were the youth coaches.
He came here having played at Penn State himself, which was rare for someone who played at Penn State to come to a small town like Fleetwood. But he came and he started using his brain and his mind to find players who had possibilities. And so he kept track of them through the years. And he knew when they were little, we lived near him on Washington Street when the kids were little, and he knew from the get-go that my kids were going to play for him.
You know, winning districts before there were even state championships, winning districts, people caught on real quickly, and we had lots of fans. The administration was very helpful because, you know, they closed down school when we loaded buses to go to places. We had no idea it would grow like this. And when you start winning, you know, success breeds success. And people like to be winners.
And so if it wasn't soccer, it was swimming. Even in the early years, without a pool, residents always found a way to cool off in the summer by the dam or in the park, which was planned in 1948.
While growing up in Fleetwood, we didn't have a swimming pool. We learned to swim in the old dam. At the west end of Main Street, there's an old stone mill, And on South Chestnut Street, where there's houses now, there was a dam. It dammed up the Willow Creek, and they used the water power from that dam, ran it down through a pipe into the mill. And that's when they were grinding, the water level, of course, went down. And we didn't stay there too long to swim. That's where I learned to swim. We had no pool.
While I grew up, I saw this park become a wonderful place, thanks to a donation of land by Doc Rauch.
I grew up in the 50s, and they were cleaning the Fleetwood Park out. The Fleetwood Park was nothing but a cornfield originally, and I remember going to the Fleetwood Park with Doc Rauch and picking up rocks and taking them over to the creek so they could plant grass at the Fleetwood Park.
Slowly, pavilions were built. As I said, the J.C.'s built a concession stand, and I saw the building of the swimming pool.
Across Main Street, the J.C.'s did even more for the community by building Smithfield for Little League.
I was co-chairman of the committee when we decided, the J.C.'s decided that we should have a ball field for the young kids. So we looked into that. We bought land to become a field, and that was a big project. We had a lot of people volunteer their services, equipment, as well as manpower.
We bought the field from Smith, and we took out tons of rock. Roger Blue could bring his tractor and wagon and take out tons of rock. And then at night, we'd take turns going there to turn the water on to water the grass.
One night, I'm living on Main Street, but several blocks away. One night, I get up in the middle of the night. My wife says, "What are you doing?" He says, "We planted grass seed, and have the sprinklers going." And I forgot to shut off the sprinklers. So I get out of bed and get dressed and go down, turn off the sprinklers. But no damage was done.
As a kid in Fleetwood, the biggest summer activity was sleeping out and sneaking through the neighborhood to meet your friends after curfew, or pulling a prank in the moonlight, hoping not to get caught by your parents or the police.
We loved to sleep out during the summer. We didn't have air conditioning in the houses. It got hot, and lots of the houses had tin roofs on, so which permeates, you know. So in the summertime, a bunch of us used to sleep on the second floor of my dad's garage. And we had a club there, and we'd sit there and play blackjack for 5 cents, nickels.
Well, one time where the elementary school on Vine Street, there used to be a one-story old stone schoolroom where they had a bell on the steeple. We rang that son of a gun one time at night. Some of us kids that were sleeping out somehow or other got, I guess, fastened a rope or got a hold of the rope. They rang the bell and pulled it. This was middle of the night. And then he rang the bell and we all took off. So they didn't catch us, but a lot of people wondered what was happening.
I know
Dean was caught one time under a car, and he was sleeping already and stuff, and so I had to go up to Borough Hall and pick him up. I can't remember who but that's the last time he slept out on the front porch with anybody.
My one brother could probably tell you some stories though that they got in more trouble than me. I remember Chief Fox coming to the house one night. I never saw my dad so mad.
And And while kids will be kids, Fleetwood has always had a proud sense of service, from the police to the fire company, and to patriotism and honoring our veterans. From the early days of Fleetwood, flags always flew on Main Street, and houses displayed the stars and stripes through the wars.
When the 4th of July comes around and Memorial Day come around, I don't know that there's a house that doesn't line their curb with flags all the way down, around the circle, and all the way back out the other side. Flags are flying at the houses.
Well, we have a lot of veterans. And I think that's part of a Pennsylvania Dutch culture, being loyal to your country and giving back.
I remember a board up what used to be the little town hall. There was a board there with everybody's name that was in World War II. And you saw that all the time. And you know, if you didn't know someone, if it wasn't no one from your family, you knew somebody from another family that was involved. And I think that made us feel patriotic.
Well, I remember during World War II how we collected tinfoil, and we smashed cans, and we bought war bonds in the school here to help the forces. We've always had the Memorial Day Parade, which has been a real tradition for Fleetwood.
World War II, you could walk the streets in Fleetwood and see the little flags hanging with stars on. And of course, you were hoping you wouldn't see any with a gold star, just blue, because the gold star meant a loss.
For me, I remember parts of World War II. I was just a kid, but I remember getting a day off. Everybody brought their wagons, and we went door to door collecting the tin cans. We were allowed to do that. I remember my 4th grade teacher had a son in World War II, and she's sitting there teaching, but at the same time she's knitting sweaters, gloves, hats for the servicemen.
There's a lot of history there, and people do talk about that history, and it's nice to see the flags hanging for the veterans and the Memorial Day Parade, the speaker at the park. That's very motivational and very significant in remembering the veterans.
And to this day, the tradition continues, which bodes well for the future of the town.
I had big shoes to fill. Our previous mayor, Gary Ebling, had passed away, sadly, and I was named as mayor. It is an honor to be the mayor, and it's not something I take lightly. I love this town, I love this community. I love the forward direction that I think we're moving in.
Constantly moving forward and embracing new technologies and new ideas, but also holding a firm foundation of who we are and where we've been.
I think it's going to be progressive because the new people that are moving in have new ideas and are, the ones I've met, easy to work with and cooperative. And they want the best for their kids. And you know, like I say, change is not always good, but I think it's been good for Fleetwood.
You know, there are so many individuals who I consider greats that have come before me, both whether it be educationally, an academic standpoint, or just a community outreach standpoint. I want to continue the legacy, and I think that's part of what Fleetwood strives for is, you know, we let go of maybe some of the past, but we hope to reshape that into the modern future and hope to still continue some of that lasting tradition that has maybe been here for 150 years.
Home is where you make it, and you have to put effort into that. You can't just exist in a town without being a part of it. So I think when people move on and they realize how much part of this town that they were, even if it's running into people they know at the grocery store or looking forward to an annual event that happens every year, like the carnival, I think when they move away, they realize that they really do miss those things, and those things are important. and that if they're not going to build those where they are, then they should come home and build it here.
There's no doubt that Fleetwood is a special place, and in the next 150 years, more people will find it. It will always be the good old days of Fleetwood, the people, the businesses, and the memories that will leave a lasting impression.
The first building in Fleetwood is the Fleetwood Hotel. It was built in 1775 to 76. It was built by a man called Peter Warner. Peter Warner and another gentleman built the feed mill, the grist mill in Fleetwood. A lot of people don't remember that, but Peter Warner was a captain in the military during the Revolutionary War, and he supplied feed to the Continental Army down at Valley Forge.
Some of the first Cadillacs ever made in this country were made right here in Fleetwood. And they moved out, I guess, in 1931. But that's one of the first things that comes to mind.
You have so many characters here.
Yeah, I remember Rauch. You run into him when he come into the Grand Central. And I remember him, he was a character.
Oh, Hesse, oh God.
I flipped pancakes with Hesse. I can't remember his first name.
Yeah, Ralphie Hess.
Hesse.
Hesse with a drill wagon.
He would go around town collecting newspapers. And I don't know if he ever went to school or not, but he was, people would talk to him and then he'd say, "You're a character." And I think everybody remembered him like that. And I remember after his dad died, he could not stay by himself, but he came into Grand Central and wanted everybody's address. And I thought, well, this is, you know, he's not going to follow through with this. But he really did. He wrote us a letter. Or I shouldn't say he wrote it. He dictated it to a nurse and sent a letter and told us about where he was staying and how he liked it and, you know, so on. But he was just a poor soul that everybody knew in Fleetwood.
Oh, well, I remember Punk Seiler. Everybody remembered Punk Seiler.
He sold you 25 pounds of ice for 50 cents, and you paid 50 cents to chop it up. And he would drive around to the different bar rooms and restaurants and drop off the ice, because those days you didn't have ice makers. So he was an unseen person behind the scene.
And of course, Marky Strause was a fixture in Fleetwood. He got around and everybody knew him.
And I keep going back to the Sheridan store. One story was that just to show how much of a character he was. First of all, we went down and bought balloons from Mr. Sheridan. Then we filled them with water and went up on the roof, and he would come out smoking a cigar, and he'd lean out, and just at that point we'd let some balloons drop. And he kept this up and then we go back down and buy balloons and go back. And finally, I guess he got a little bit tired of it, and then he called Chuck's mother and put an end to it. But you know, it was a slow day for him, but selling penny balloons.
I'm in the music program, which is such a big part of Fleetwood, and it's like a great part of Fleetwood too. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not impartial just because my dad works for the music program. But like, if he didn't, I still would say it's one of the best parts of being in Fleetwood.
Our music base, our music system at the high school is excellent.
Kurt Stauffer and Chuck Eppersole and the guys that followed, Mr. Nygaard and Mr. Katzenmoyer, have done a terrific job in the music department.
The drum corps.
And that kitty.
A big thing in the town for growing up, if you like music, was the American Legion Junior Drum and Bugle Corps. Amazingly, we were pretty good. And in parades, competitions.
That's where I met him.
Many, many years ago.
Yeah, it is many years ago. We're married 69.
A lot of memories. A lot of memories.
This is where our hearts are, and this is where our history was.
People live here for years and never moved.
The support of the folks that live in Fleetwood and the surrounding communities that you know, keep the wheels turning.
I think it's a great place to live and raise your children and, you know, go forward in life.
Yeah, I'm glad I lived here as long as I did.
What a nice small town it is. Friendly, everybody knew each other back then.
Not a lot of hustle bustle, you know, you can still only have a couple of traffic lights.
Even though it's a little bit bigger, it still has a small town atmosphere, I think.
I like to sit on my rocking chair and watch the world go by.
And I think it's an easy place, you know, if you wanted to talk to the president of the council or if you want to talk to the mayor, you know, people are reachable, touchable.
I really look forward to a really vibrant future.
It's been a great 17 years that I've lived in Fleetwood, and I wouldn't change a thing. I really wouldn't.
I wish that we could just go back in time. I would love to go back in time and be in Fleetwood 100 years ago. And my house that I live in now would have just been built. And I would love to look up and down the street and see what Fleetwood looks like 100 years ago. I think that'd be really amazing.
Well, I just remember you're filming all of it.
We're married 69. Yeah. Holy shit.
Get me a makeup artist to make me look good on the film.
Did you get answers on that?
Don't put that in.
Well, you can bleep the ones you don't want.
I wish my parents and my grandparents would be here.